Economies around the world are bracing for a potential trade war triggered by recent tariff announcements by U.S. President Donald Trump. For this week's Weekly Focus, we take a closer look at the matter with our trade correspondent, Lee Sujin. Welcome back, Sujin.
Thank you for having me.
So, Sujin, walk us through what exactly happened for the past couple of days on the trade front.
Sure, so it has been a rather tumultuous couple of days on the economic front as Trump's tariff threats sparked concerns of a global trade war. On Saturday, local time, Trump announced 25% tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico, while China was hit with a 10% tariff on various existing duty rates. Let's take a listen to what Trump said on tariffs.
And I don't want to use countries, I don't want to use names, but tariffs are very powerful, both economically and in getting everything else you want.
And what he wanted was for the three countries to address trade imbalances, national security concerns related to illegal immigration, and the influx of fentanyl into the United States. And while the tariffs were to go into effect on Tuesday, Trump on Monday decided to pause the implementation of the tariffs for Canada and Mexico for at least 30 days. This comes as Canada agreed to implement a $1.3 billion border plan, which includes reinforcing the border with nearly 10,000 frontline personnel, as well as strengthening resources to respond to fentanyl and money laundering. And Mexico agreed to place 10,000 National Guard troops along the U.S. border to prevent the flow of drugs.
And doesn't it look like another trade war between the U.S. and China is heating up, setting up for stage another long, costly battle like we saw 6-7 years ago?
Right, so like we just discussed, the U.S. tariffs on Canada and Mexico have been delayed for 30 days, but China was given no such reprieve. And Trump's 10% tariff on Chinese products took effect just after midnight Tuesday. Within minutes, China's finance ministry announced retaliatory tariffs of 15% on U.S. coal and LNG, as well as 10% on crude oil, farm equipment, and certain vehicles to take effect on February 10th. And according to this expert, China's choice of which items to impose tariffs on was deliberate.
The phenomenon here is the agricultural pickup trucks will make magnificent impacts on the agriculture area that are very strong supporters for Donald Trump. And another, the target items, coals and LNG, the oil refining the companies are also very strong supporters for Donald Trump.
And China on Wednesday, just one day after Trump raised border taxes on Chinese goods, filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization, calling the tariffs discriminatory and protectionist and a violation of true trade rules.
Sujin, then we have to talk about what Trump's tariffs mean for us, South Korea.
Right, so South Korea may actually see both risks and opportunities in regards to the tariffs on China. To start out with the positive, the tariffs imposed on China mean that Korean exporters may gain a competitive edge in supplying products that China previously dominated. This means that U.S. companies may shift their supply chains to South Korean firms. Let's take a listen.
In markets like the semiconductor industry, companies like SK Hynix already have a strong presence. And if tariffs are imposed on China, South Korean products could gain an even greater competitive advantage.
As semiconductors are South Korea's top export item, this would boost the country's trade surplus, but also enhance the global competitiveness of Korean chip makers like SK Hynix. But the expected drop in exports of Chinese goods to the U.S. may reduce Chinese orders for South Korea's key intermediate goods, such as chips, display panels, and batteries. Here's what the same expert said.
Our country's export structure depends on selling intermediate goods to China, for them to be assembled into the final product for export to other countries. So if demand for China's goods declines, demand for these intermediate goods will also decline.
More than 85% of Korea's exports to China were intermediate goods, such as semiconductors, displays, and wireless communication components, according to the Korea International Trade Association. It's also important to note that there are also growing concerns about the possibility of tariffs on the EU and South Korea, as well as sector-specific tariffs on products such as semiconductors and steel.
Then how should the government and Korean firms respond to these ongoing, growing tariff threats?
Well, for one, staying proactive will be key in this turbulent trade environment. And the South Korean government is already doing so through measures announced on Wednesday that include establishing a strategic advanced industry fund worth over 34 trillion Korean won, or around $23 billion to boost industrial competitiveness. Let's take a listen.
Ongoing global trade uncertainties, including additional tariffs on China, require close attention. We will establish a strategic advanced industry fund at the Industrial Bank of Korea to support high-tech sectors like batteries and biotech.
The government also plans to carry out other industry-specific measures, such as strengthening U.S. outreach for semiconductor and battery companies, diversifying markets for the automotive sector, and mobilizing task forces. As for the private sector, SK Group Chairman Choi Tae-won will lead a delegation to Washington, D.C. on the 19th to discuss response strategies, with a meeting with Trump reportedly under discussion. And here's why this is important at this time.
While Trump has not targeted Korea directly, he is threatening tariffs on virtually everybody, said that he wanted to replace subsidies for semiconductor factories with high tariffs.
And moving forward, here's what companies that have factories in the U.S. can do, according to the expert I spoke to.
Many South Korean companies have factories in Republican-leaning U.S. areas, and by working with local politicians, they can argue that these tariffs could hinder job creation and investment.
I see. Sujin, thank you for the wrap-up today.
Anytime, Tommy.